friends, welcome back or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum. And in today's video, I want to talk about some things that I love in books. Things that I have come across while reading that make me enjoy a book a lot more, and things that I consistently find myself enjoying across different books or even different types of books. This is definitely not an exhaustive list. I'm always finding out more and more about my own reading tastes and finding new things I love. And definitely, I'm not the best at pinpointing why I love a book always when I'm reading something I'm enjoying. I tend to have a much easier time pinpointing why I'm not enjoying something. So I think over time, I'll definitely be able to expand on this list. But for now, I thought it would be fun to kind of run down the things that I have noticed. And also, I would love if any of these descriptions kind of fit books that come to mind for you. Definitely let me know what those books are down below in the comments, so that I can go check them out. So without further ado, the first thing that I absolutely love in books is an emotional, reactive character who's going through something tough and is letting you in on kind of how they're feeling or how they were feeling if they're narrating in the past tense. And a couple examples I have of that are The Sword of Kaigen. Definitely Misaki fits that very well. And The Burning God, because Rin definitely fits that for me, especially later on in the series with Burning God. These are definitely some of my all-time favorite books for a reason, and I think both of those kind of fit that description to a T. The next element that kind of makes a book really stand out to me as something I love is a very intricate plot with a lot of moving pieces and things to kind of have theories about and questions on. And definitely two examples that come to mind very quickly for me when I think about that are Malice by John Gwynne, the first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. I was like full on like crazy theory lady reading this book. This was such a great ride. And another book that I would say has a 10 out of 10 plot that I got to have so many theories on, and this one has a bit more payoff up front in the first book. That's The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks, the first book in the Night Angel trilogy. I do think in this example it's a bit more even paced because you're getting some of the payoff a little bit sooner, but I do have a feeling I will get some payoff later on in the Faithful and the Fallen series, so I'm not worried about it. The next thing I have found that I always tend to really enjoy in a book is a hard magic system with a lot of detail. And as you're kind of reading the detail, you get to have guesses on kind of like how the intricacies of the magic system may affect the plot moving forward. And definitely, if you think of hard magic system, you can't go wrong with Sanderson. So I've got Mistborn here, Final Empire, and this has more than one intricate hard magic system. So definitely this is a great example of what I'm talking about. But also in terms of other authors that have done this, I really enjoyed the magic system in Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. The Lightbringer system isn't as intricate as Sanderson's, and it also doesn't give you as much detail up front. It's more something you unpack slowly over the course of the series as you encounter more and more of it. But definitely I still got to have the experience of having theories about how the magic was going to affect the plot, and I think that kind of is the key for me. So another thing I love in a book is a really good romance. And for me, a good romance kind of spans a couple different areas, but I do find that the absolute best ones have sort of two common elements. One is that it's very compelling why these characters are together. It's more than just they find each other attractive, it's that they find qualities in each other attractive as well. There's some nuance to why they feel the way they do. And the second aspect of it for me is that it's a little bit more slow burn. You're kind of slowly uncovering why they feel the way that they do. And some great examples of this kind of a romance for me are the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy, first book being Guild. This is extremely slow burn, and actually there are kind of like hints of the romance in book 2, but it's really book 3 in this series where you finally get into the romance. So I'm sure you can imagine that it's very slow burn, but also because the characters spend a lot of time together leading up to that, you're also getting sort of like the more nuanced, compelling reasons why they're attracted to each other and interested in each other. And the second great example of this that I have is Radiance by Grace Draven. And this follows a couple who's kind of thrust into a political marriage, and up front they're appalled by each other, but they slowly grow to learn more and more about each other because they're kind of thrust together, and they grow to appreciate and love each other, which is just really awesome to watch. Next up, we got to talk about even pacing in a book. I like a book that can keep me interested in turning the pages throughout because I'm consistently getting some payoff as I read. And I have a couple thrillers in mind that do this extremely well. The first one of those is Confessions by Kanai Minato. And this is a bit unique in that there are probably, I think, 5 or 6 chapters in here. They're all sort of a longer chapter, but each chapter follows a different perspective, and each perspective has something to add to the overall story. And because of that, you're consistently kind of uncovering more and more towards the bigger picture here. And the pacing definitely is better for it. The second example I have of this is The Passengers by John Mars. This is also a story told in multiple perspectives, but the chapters are kind of like medium to shorter, and you're jumping from perspective to perspective throughout the book. But something is happening to each one of these people, and you're consistently learning more and consistently having more to question. So definitely I would say this is a great example of even pacing as well. I certainly can still enjoy books that kind of have all the payoff towards the end, but I do tend to find that a lot of my absolute favorites have some payoff earlier. Another thing I absolutely love is really good subtle foreshadowing that you find out in hindsight was there all along. So when you get the answers or the reveals, you're like, aha, I should have seen that coming because of X, Y, and Z, but I didn't. I just love the feeling of being able to, in hindsight, figure out that like, oh, this was planned and this was layered in, and it was like so smart on the author's part. And one really good example I have of a series that gave me that sort of a feeling is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, which is kind of wild because I don't think he tends to like fully plan out his books, but he's definitely very intentional in how he weaves things together and in how he projects certain people and things to kind of fit the narrative he's going for. Another more recent example of a book that did this very well for me is Triptych by Karen Slaughter. And this is a thriller that you kind of like get a bit of the story in part 1, and then you switch to a different character and you don't really understand how it connects in part 2. But then in part 3, the pieces start coming together and you definitely realize, oh, this foreshadowing was there throughout the first 2 parts, and I appreciated this book for that reason. The next couple things I absolutely love in a book is just high stakes and tension. So when I read, I don't want to feel like the characters are safe. I don't want to just be like, okay, this action scene is like, we know the outcome, so who cares? I love when an author has me on the edge of my seat while I'm reading, because I am scared, I am worried, and I don't know what's going to happen. And one really great example of that to me is Pierce Brown with the Red Rising series, and particularly in Golden Sun. This is definitely tense and high stakes, and the ending of this, like, whoo, yeah. Another example of just a really tension-filled book for me is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is an enemies to lovers romantasy where you have a witch and a witch hunter coming together, and they're sort of like fake dating in a way. They have their own motivations for kind of getting into this relationship. And so definitely, I'm sure you can imagine from what I've just told you, this is very tense. And the last kind of common element I have found in my favorites that I tend to always love is when an author can kind of slowly change your mind or your perspective on something over the course of a book. And I do have a couple examples that come to mind for me for this as well. The first one is Iron Gold, which is the 4th Red Rising book by Pierce Brown. And definitely this is not a popular favorite in the series, and I think it's because of that element. Mainly this is kind of where the series starts to change your perspective on maybe being able to root for certain characters, and a lot of people didn't enjoy that, but I loved it. I loved that in hindsight you got to kind of question what your thoughts were when you were reading and sort of realize that like, oh, I hadn't thought all the ramifications of this through, and this was just really fascinating for that reason for me. Another great example of a book that did this for me is Sword of Kaigen. We're back again. But definitely there is a character in here that I had certain impressions about, and there's a chapter in here where another character is frustrated with them and they confront them, and then the other character gives you sort of their perspective and their reasoning, and like, mind-blowing. Not only was the confrontation really, really cathartic, like so cathartic I was crying because I was so frustrated for this character, but also there was just some great reasoning on the other character's part that really had me questioning my assumptions, and I enjoyed that experience too. Also, if you want that experience in more of a thriller, The Passengers does this well too. So those were some things that I have noticed that I always tend to love in books. Definitely let me know down below in the comments. Do you have any things like this that you always tend to love in books? I definitely enjoy hearing other people put into words kind of what they love, because sometimes it can help me understand why I appreciated a book more. And then also let me know in the comments for sure if, while I was describing any of these elements, there was a book that came to mind for you that fit that well, because I would love to add more 5-star predictions to my TBR. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out if you want to, and have a great day. Bye.